Hey everybody, Derek here to bring another video for The Walking Dead Season 6. As you can see, I had to shave my Rick Grimes beard off for some law school events. However, I am back and making videos now. And what I'm going to do in this video is predict what I think will happen in the 11th episode of Season 6 called Untie. If you are not caught up with the Walking Dead TV show or the comics, and you do not want to be spoiled in any way, then exit the video now and come back later, because otherwise you will be spoiled. Okay. So, one of the things that we left off with in the last episode was the group running into Paul Jesus Rovier, I guess is his new last name. Jesus is a comic book character who, in the comics, Michonne and Abraham run into him, but in the television show it was Rick and Daryl, and they bring Jesus back to Alexandria to, question him about some things. Jesus ended up escaping and caught Rick and Michonne in bed together, and basically said that he needed to talk to them. I think what this is really going to be related to is where Jesus is from. Jesus is from a community in the comic books called the Hilltop, and it's a community that has a mansion with motorhomes that people live in. It's a very rural type of environment. And one of the things that we notice about the different communities in the Walking Dead world is that they all have different resources to offer each other. Rick's group, in Alexandria, they have a lot of weapons. They do have an armory. They have medicine. They have things that they can give to people to spare. However, they're having a problem with food. And one of the things that the Hilltop community has is a lot of food. They do farm. They have a lot of grains and other kinds of crops that they can give to Rick's group in exchange for their help. And I think that's really what the episode is going to be about. I think that it's going to be the group going to the Hilltop, because the promos show Jesus talking with Rick, Daryl. I think that Michonne and Abraham were also in the room, basically saying, your world's about to get a lot bigger. And I think that's because he's going to tell them about the community. And I think that the episode is going to deal with them going to the community. They might make it there, they may not. But I think it's more likely that they will make it there, because a lot of the stories that they've been showing in the promos, I don't think they could satisfy an entire episode. So I think there's more going on. So what happens in the promo is we see Rick, Daryl, Glenn, Maggie, Michonne, and Abraham all getting into the RV, and they're driving to what I presume will be Alexandria. And one of the things that we see in the preview is they're driving along, and they look around in the area and they stop. I think that this is probably something that is dealing with the Hilltop. I think what's going to happen here is I think that maybe there's going to be like some kind of an outpost or something that the Hilltop residents have, or maybe some of their group members were on a scavenging run. There may be more of them out there than just Jesus doing things, and they may run across someone in trouble. They may find out that, hey, there should be people here and there's nobody here, and they go to investigate. And I think that this is going to deal a lot with the group finding trust in Jesus, because, Rick's group has ran into a lot of threats out there. We've met numerous people like the governor, the cannibals, the wolves, who have really caused Rick's group a lot of harm, and definitely makes it a lot tougher for people to earn trust. But what I think this episode is really going to deal with, especially this concept of knots untie, the title of the episode, I think it's going to deal a lot with the group trusting Jesus because of something that Jesus does. In the comic books, when they are on their way to the community of the hilltop, Jesus, his hands were tied up, and I think his feet might have been too, but they basically had him tied up so he wouldn't do anything, because we know that Jesus is very physical. He's able to, defend himself. He's got some kind of karate or judo or whatever that is, but they tie him up. And in the episode, well, in the comic book slides, they get attacked by walkers. And Jesus is able to, jump in and save people. Because he's able to kill walkers with his, hands and feet alone. Like, he can throw a walker on the ground and stomp on its head. So I think that's going to happen in this episode, because we see a scene where Rick has him tied up, and he basically says, if I whistle, shoot him. And I think that at some point, I think that they're going to run into some trouble, maybe with walkers. I'm assuming it's going to be a walker issue rather than the saviors. But I think that what's going to happen is they're going to run into a walker problem. And I think that Jesus is going to save somebody. It basically is something along the lines of, hey, you had my hands you had my hands tied, but I was able to get untied, and I saved you. And, if that doesn't build trust, what does? Trust is obviously something that you have to earn in the Walking Dead world. It's not just as simple as saying, yo, man, trust me, or, hey, I swear to God, in today's world, you might think that that is something that does have a lot of significance, but in the Walking Dead world, not so much, especially after all the things that you've seen. But I think that the knots untying, in the one hand, it symbolizes Jesus's trust that he is building with the group. I think that by untying the knots that bind everybody's hesitation with him, that bind their, thinkings about how the world works, I think that it's really going to challenge them, and it's going to make them trust him a little bit more. And we see in the previews, there's a scene where they're walking through grass and a path. And I think that that's the path to the hilltop. And I think that, actually, one thing you can tell is that there are more people in that group. So either they do save some people from the hilltop when they are dealing with the walkers, or they run into them whenever they, get up to the perimeter. Because the hilltop does have a wall around it, and it's guarded by people, but the people have spears. Like, that's literally how lacking they are in weaponry. They don't have guns, or very little if they do. So they use spears to, defend themselves. And, we may meet some of the very significant characters from the hilltop, like Cal. He's one of the guards at the hilltop. Eduardo, he's another guard. We may run into Dr. Harlan, who is the doctor in the Hilltop Colony. And, this would make sense because with Maggie being pregnant and Maggie going along on the journey, it may be time for her to be looked at. I don't know what kind of technology they might have, how exactly they'd be able to tell how the baby's doing. But, nonetheless, maybe there are some signs. I'm not a doctor myself. I'm not an expert in that. But, that maybe there are ways that they can tell Maggie's health just from what they have. And potentially the doctor is going to be able to look at her and reassure her that, things are going to be okay. I'm sure they're concerned about, Maggie having the baby because, we saw how Lori died during her pregnancy. So I think that that's going to be a concern where Maggie and Glenn are concerned. And I think that we might see something like that happen if they introduce Dr. Harlan. But the one character that, I'm kind of looking forward to them, introducing, but on the other hand, I would rather, I dread him coming, if you will, is Gregory, which I believe will be played by Xander Berkeley, an amazing actor. He was on the show 24. He played George Mason. I know he was in one of the Taken movies, I think. he's been in quite a few different films. He was the Secret Service agent that turned traitor in Air Force One, starring Harrison Ford. So he's been around, and I really have enjoyed his performances. But in the comic books, Gregory is the self-professed leader of the Hilltop. But of course, people don't really respect him. He's more of a figurehead. He's more somebody who gets the pleasure and thrill out of walking around and saying, hey, I'm the guy in charge. Hey, this thing's going great. But at the same time, he's not very capable of, doing what is best for other people. He's more self-centered. He's more somebody who focuses on his own image rather than everybody else's. And, when things are going good, sure, hey, that's fine. He can take the credit. But when things start to turn terrible, he doesn't really know how to respond to these situations. And I get the feeling that if he is introduced in this episode, he is not going to get along with Rick's group right away. I think there's going to be some tension. I think on the one hand, I think he might feel threatened by Rick, Daryl, Glenn, Maggie, Michonne, and Abraham's appearance. He might think that it's, new people that are going to take away his power. So I think he's going to be really determined to, make himself feel more important and kind of shove those other guys into the background. So I think that might happen. And of course, the one thing that I am curious about that will happen is, will we meet a character by the name of Ethan? And will they do the storyline that they do at this point in Volume 16? I think that's a very good likelihood that might happen in either this episode or the next. It's really going to depend on the timing of everything. But let me explain what happens. In the comic books, the Saviors have had encounters with the Hilltop. The two communities are very familiar with each other. And what ends up happening is the Saviors basically take food from the Hilltop in exchange for protecting them in the minds of Negan and his men and his fighters. But in all honesty, they're bullies who basically just have a lot of firepower, have a lot of people that are tougher, that, are more dangerous, and it's really they have to hand it over or else bad things are going to happen. And during this time period, some bad things were happening, and some of the Hilltop community members are killed. Ethan, who was a member of the Hilltop, was in that group. He gets sent back to the Hilltop to give Gregory a message. And that message was to stab and kill Gregory, which Ethan does stab Gregory. But Rick is there, Rick steps in, and they fight, and Ethan ends up getting killed in the process. I think something similar is going to happen in the television show, and I think that this is going to be the time, just like in the comics, when Rick's group is officially made aware of the Saviors. They know about them from Daryl's encounter with them, Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham, but the extent of them, they don't know. Like, they don't know that Negan is a very powerful man. They don't know that maybe there's 50, 100, maybe 200 fighters that live in the sanctuary where the Saviors are. So they may not be aware of this, but I think that this is the episode where they will be made aware of it, and I think it's going to cause some of the storylines that go down the road. Some of the other things that I think may happen has been indicated by the sneak peek in the episode, and it was with Abraham and Sasha. And I think that, the way that they were reacting to each other was a little bit mixed. You could kind of see Abraham and Sasha kind of talking lighthearted in a sense, but also seeing this, distance between them. We know that it's been 2 months since the 9th episode. So we don't know yet whether Abraham broke up with Rosita and was with Sasha. We don't know if anything ever happened, or we don't know if something was happening between them and maybe they broke up. But the language almost made it seem like they weren't together, that they were not interested in each other like they were before. Well, Sasha was still kind of skeptical about the whole thing. But I think we might see a little bit of a storyline there as well. We may see that Abraham is not with Rosita or Sasha, or he's still with Rosita, and maybe just like in the comics, he's been seeing both of them, and Sasha just got sick of it and basically gave him the ultimatum of, look, you either leave Rosita or you stay with her. I don't care what you do, but this isn't happening. With you being with Rosita, it's either you be with one person or you be with none of us or her. And I think that what we might see here is a little bit of a conflict with Abraham, because we've noticed that Abraham is very reckless, takes a lot of risks, puts himself in danger, and I have to wonder if with the events that are coming up, if he might not take a risk. We kind of see him in one of the scenes walking down the corridor of a house, in a very fast, angry manner. So you really have to wonder if he is still prone to taking risks, kind of like how he wasn't always accountable when he, crawled out on the fence to get that RPG and almost got bit or could have fallen over the side of the bridge. But I think that we might see him getting a little bit more reckless as well if he's not with either of them or if he's feeling conflicted. And I think that, with his story, it's either going to get better for him or it's not. And one of the things that I'm concerned about with him is that with the Saviors coming, will he be able to settle down in the walls of Alexandria like he wants to do? Or is he going to, be like this reckless person all the time? Because one of the things that I noticed was they were talking about outposts, and Eugene was going to start taking the shifts with Abraham. And in the comic books, the two of them being together is very significant for this one part in the story. I'm going to do my death predictions video next to give you guys a little more of an understanding, but this may be a sign that things may not be good for Abraham in the future. But I think it's going to be an interesting episode. I think we're going to be exposed to the Hilltop Colony, and the world as we know it in the Walking Dead world will get bigger and hopefully more exciting. So I can't wait. So with that, I'm going to bring this video to a close. I want to thank all of you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, don't be afraid to leave them. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. Have a very wonderful evening, and thank you very much for watching.